Welcome to this video where we'll explore how phrase rhythm shapes the formal structure of two classical piano works. The first movement of Mozart's Piano Sonata in D major, K311, and the first movement of Beethoven's Piano Sonata in C major, Opus 53, the Waldstein. We'll first examine the concept of phrase rhythm. Then we'll dive into how phrase rhythm connects to the rhetoric of sonata form, especially the exposition section. Finally, the Mozart and Beethoven pieces will serve as exemplary case studies to demonstrate this connection. One of the most influential founding works on phrase rhythm is William Rothstein's 1989 book, Phrase Rhythm in Tonal Music. Drawing from a wide range of repertoire, from Haydn to Wagner, Rothstein's work examines the basics of phrase rhythm and illustrates various advanced techniques that can enrich the durational design of a piece. At the core of phrase rhythm are two essential components: hypermeter and grouping structure. On one hand, hypermeter expresses a metric level that uses measures as the basic unit. Zooming out from the local beat level signified by the time signature, each measure can be conceived as an individual hyperbeat, and a periodic organization of these hyperbeats then forms the hypermeter. In contrast, grouping structure indicates units with clearly defined beginnings and endings in terms of melodic and harmonic aspects. These units or groups can be analytically represented by bracketing them on the score. Ultimately, phrase rhythm can thus be understood as the dynamic interplay between hypermeter and grouping structure, together shaping the piece's overarching durational design. Now, let's examine some representative phrase rhythmic designs. A rudimentary case is the synchronized coordination between hypermeter and grouping structure, exemplified by the secondary theme from Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata. Here, the 4-bar hypermeter aligns perfectly with the 4+4 antecedent and consequent phrases. Crucially, the groups articulate their strongest hyperbeat at the beginning of the phrase. This creates a beginning accented phrase rhythmic structure. Let's listen to this excerpt. In contrast, the closing zone of Mozart's Piano Sonata K, 311, demonstrates how hypermeter and groupings can work out of sync. When the more elaborate theme emerges at measure 28, its progression outlines a quadruple hypermetric pattern of 2-3-4-1. In other words, the groups here articulate their strongest hyperbeat at the ending of the phrase. This misalignment between hypermeter and grouping creates an end-accented phrase rhythm. Let's listen to this excerpt. Before exploring phrase rhythm's connection to sonata form rhetoric, let's examine another crucial technique, phrase overlap. This occurs when a group's ending coincides with the next group's beginning, creating continuity between the phrases. For instance, in the restatement of the 4-bar closing theme in the Mozart Sonata, the cadential ending on measure 36's downbeat overlaps with the cadetta's opening phrase. While this does not interrupt the ongoing quadruple hypermeter, phrase overlap can sometimes prompt a metrical reinterpretation at the hypermetric level, an initially weak hyperbeat reinterpreted as strong, often marked by contrasting dynamics, register, and motivic materials. The Beethoven Sonata's secondary theme restatement illustrates this. The consequent phrase's ending in measure 50 coincides with the next phrase's beginning. Reinforced by the loud dynamics and the new syncopated bass line, This overlap prompts a metrical reinterpretation. The initially weak hyperbeat 4 becomes the new hypermetric downbeat, labelled 4/1. Let's listen to these two excerpts back to back and observe the qualitative differences between phrase overlap with and without metrical reinterpretation. Now that we've explored phrase rhythm techniques like beginning accented and end accented phrases, phrase overlap, and metrical reinterpretation, we can investigate how these elements serve as primary factors in understanding sonata form. This discussion and the following analyses draw from Samuel Ng's 2012 article, Phrase Rhythm as Form in Classical Instrumental Music, which integrates and extends the concepts from James Hepakoski and Warren Darcy's sonata theory. According to Hepakoski and Darcy's model, the tonal and thematic designs in sonata form exhibit multiple levels of default. For example, the contrasting key in the exposition's secondary theme zone is typically the dominant in a major mode sonata. Building on this, Ng proposes that the sonata formal trajectory also depends on a phrase rhythmic dimension, which exhibits its own patterns of default. For instance, at the first level default, the primary and secondary theme zones typically feature beginning accented phrases, while the closing zone exhibits a co-first level default of either end accented phrases or beginning accented phrases with continuous overlaps. Additionally, the unstable transition can be intensified by phrase rhythmic instability, such as overlaps and metrical reinterpretations. The Beethoven and Mozart sonatas discussed here conform to these first-level phrase rhythmic defaults, but less typical situations are also possible. With this understanding of the connection between phrase rhythm and sonata form, let's now explore the selected works in greater detail. Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata begins with a primary theme in a sentential structure. The 4+4 presentation phrase and the following cadential phrase, with a written-out ritardando, articulate a beginning accented, quadruple phrase rhythmic pattern typical of the primary theme zone. The thematic restatement, starting at measure 14, initially suggests a consequent phrase, but soon dissolves into the transition, reinforced by a hypermetric reinterpretation in measure 23 that initiates the dominant lock in E major. The subsequent secondary theme zone also features a quadruple beginning accented phrase rhythm. A key question here is identifying the essential expositional closure, EEC, the PAC that signals the exposition's structural closure. There are 3 PACs in this zone at measures 42, 50 and 74. Factors like temporal location, rhetoric and phrase rhythm suggest the measure 74 PAC is the strongest EEC candidate. The first 2 cadences occur too early, and the music continues similar thematic material without strong closing rhetoric. In contrast, the PAC in measure 74 is prepared by a long trill, and the subsequent materials are markedly different. Crucially, the shift to an end-accented phrase rhythmic pattern after this cadence, the co-first default of the closing zone, provides the strongest EEC indication. Let's now listen to Daniel Barenboim's performance and trace how the phrase rhythmic progression shapes the exposition. The synopsis of the phrase rhythmic trajectory below the annotated score is adapted and modified from another recent article by Samuel Ng. It reveals instances of duple phrase rhythmic groups connecting the previously discussed quadruple beginning accented and end accented phrases. Observe how this progression unfolds in this exposition. Like the Waldstein Sonata, the phrase rhythmic progression in Mozart's Piano Sonata K, 311 moves from beginning accented phrases in the primary and secondary themes to end accented phrases in the closing zone. However, the K311 primary theme exhibits more dynamic phrase rhythmic motion compared to the square-fitting quadruple rhythm in the Waldstein. This is due to the constant overlaps between short thematic modules, exemplifying what Hepakoski and Darcy call a Mozartian loop. Here, the short 4-measure module generates the loop by ending with a local imperfect authentic cadence at the downbeat of measure 4. The immediate elided repetition of this module then results in a metrical reinterpretation, with the loop's end at measure 7 further articulating a phrase, overlap, and hypermetric shift, launching the transition. The subsequent secondary theme zone in K311 features a steady quadruple beginning accented phrase rhythm. Unlike the Waldstein, there is no ambiguity in identifying the EEC here. There is only one PAC in the secondary theme zone at measure 24, and its EEC status is supported by ensuing changes in closing rhetoric. Interestingly, this EEC also marks a phrase overlap, where dynamic and rhythmic changes reinforce a metrical reinterpretation. This sets up the closing materials, which first articulate beginning accented phrases with continuous overlaps, followed by more elaborate end accented phrases. These phrase rhythmic characteristics are both co-first level defaults within the closing zone. Let's now listen to Mao Fujita's performance and trace how this phrase rhythmic progression unfolds in K311. We've now reached the end of this video. Hopefully you've gained a solid understanding of phrase rhythm and how various phrase rhythmic types and techniques can connect to the rhetoric of sonata form. In essence, the key takeaway is that when examining the tonal form of a piece, consider not only the thematic and harmonic criteria, but also the crucial phrase rhythmic dimension. By attuning to the nuances of phrase rhythm, you can develop a richer, more comprehensive understanding of tonal form. Thank you for watching.